Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Miss CJ Boyle, introduce herself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi. Like you said, my name is TJ Boyle. I am an author. I'm mostly sci-fi. I love sci-fi. If I'm writing, it's probably sci-fi.
So what is it about sci-fi over all the other genres that appeals to you?
I don't know. I guess probably it's out of the realm of reality. Probably, but you know what I'm saying? Like the fantasy or whatever you want to think of when like you can have powers or you can have flight or you could go to the moon or, like anything's possible. I think that's what it is. Anything's possible. But when you're writing for like realism, and there's no sci-fi aspect of it, you have to like adhere to a finite set of rules, like you can't have mental telepathy. You can't have spaceships and, stuff like that,
Okay. All right. Before we get too deep in this interview, we do have to do the religion questions. Are you ready for this?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Trek. It's all the way.
What is it about Trek that appeals to you?
Honestly, I mean, everything. I feel like they're, like inclusive, number one. I mean, even with the old, original Star Trek, they had women on there and they had races on there, it seemed like they were more inclusive, you know what I mean? Even, and of course now they are, way inclusive, but I like all the storylines, and as funny as it seems sometimes, I mean, I could sit there and watch it and go, oh my gosh, that's just dumb. I could see all three angles of this and fix this, faster than that, but I just love Star Trek. I sat with my dad, and I don't want to, tell everybody my age, but, used to watch it with my dad, and I just thought it was great. And of course, Captain Kirk's, over the top playing of the captain. I mean, it was kind of funny, you know what I mean? But, I just liked how, basically, like I was saying before, how it could go in any direction, like literally any direction.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer. All right, because we are polytheistic here at the Blaster Blade podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia.
What was the second one you said?
Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones, or Chronicles of Narnia, I believe. Yep, I got them out of order, but.
I think I have to say Game of Thrones.
Is it the grimdark that you like more than the other more hopeful choices, or is it just the dragons? What was it about Game of Thrones that you liked?
That's kind of hard to say because honestly, I literally hated the gross stuff. Like the like if it was rape and murder or whatever, burning kids alive or whatever. I was fast forwarding through that part. But I mean, I guess I like the storyline. And like most of the world, I didn't like how it ended. But if I had to write something other than sci-fi, it would probably be fantasy. I had dragons in book 2 of the Kirk Rogers series because it's kind of like a mashup of Game of Thrones and Star Trek, honestly. So.
Okay. All right. And one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking this question. So what is your favorite dinosaur?
I would probably have to choose the Plesiosaurus.
Okay. Why is that?
Honestly, it's just like I think it's the biggest dinosaur, right? And it's a herbivore. It doesn't eat, it's not a carnivore. It just eats trees and stuff like that. I actually, as authors, you're on Google like all day, every trying to, figure out which dinosaur you're going to have in your book or whatever. I did have, I think, a version, either the Plesiosaurus or a version of it in Sarasart 2, one of my series.
Okay. Were you a fan of the dinosaurs as a kid, or is it something you kind of came to after the Jurassic Park craze?
I think most of the time, I mean, I have a son. Okay, so my son was all into dinosaurs and everything. So every time we went to the store, he had to come home with the dinosaur. So for me personally, when I was a kid, I wasn't into dinosaurs. But you kind of have to be when you have a child and, he wants to play dinosaurs. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So as a kid, if not dinosaurs, what were you into?
Honestly, it's not like I played with Barbies either. You know what I'm saying? I'm from the generation where your parents basically put you outside all day long with your bike, and you had to play outside with your friends and not come in the house most of the time. So you were out. So you were out until dark, and then finally went into the house.
That was my childhood too, so I get you.
Yeah.
All right. And because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Honestly, coffee. I have to have coffee and cream and sugar. Splenda, most of this, not the straight sugar. That would just be too much sugar. But yeah, Splenda. I can't have it black. They say only sociopaths drink black coffee, so...
My dad told me I would start drinking black coffee when I grow up, so I guess I'm a Toys R Us kid forever. I like cream in although when I looked at the calories, I stopped putting sugar in it and I just go with the flavored creamer because that's already got sugar in it, and I call it a day.
Sure.
But I mean, if I had my own way and I didn't care about my waistline, it'd be like a Big Mac in a cup, basically, with coffee flavoring.
Yeah, me too. I mean, of course, when I go to Starbucks or something like that, I do get, I indulge. But as far as if I'm brewing it myself, it's just, cream and sugar, Splenda.
Okay. I know I did forget to do this part of the introduction, dear listener, but normally we would tell you how we first found them. But we found CJ, one of our listeners of the show, Steve, said, hey, you got to talk to this lady. And so here we are. So thanks, Steve. So how did you get into reading? Were you always a reader? Did you come from a family of readers? Is it something you picked up when you were bored as an adult?
No, I started reading a lot when I was, in grade school, really. And a wide variety of stuff as well. Stephen King, early on, I was reading Stephen King. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey, the whole thing. So there was just all kinds of different genres that I was reading. Of course, a lot of sci-fi as well, like the Dark Tower and, Riddle of the Stars. Lots of Piers Anthony, with the Zant series. Gosh, I think he's probably still writing those now. But I mean, I read so many of those. I just loved those. I thought, if I could go to Zant and live there, I would.
Okay, yeah, there's lots of fantasy worlds or sci-fi too that I'd like to live in. But when I would that's how I know the mark of a good story. When I was done reading, I would kind of picture the story going on, and I'd self-insert myself shamelessly about all the cool and heroic things you would do. But because of that, we always gave ourselves plot armor because I'm not the only one who did that, right? So of course you could go to these dangerous places because you can't die. The enemy will never hit you. You're too good for that. So
that's why I started writing, actually. It's I couldn't, I make up an adventure and I was one of the characters in there. I mean, I didn't give them my name or anything, but that's what I was picturing in my head. I'm like, yay, I'm going on an adventure.
Absolutely. Did you ever get into the adventure style choose your own adventure stories?
Yeah, I used to like those too. Yeah, awesome. I don't know if I'm smart enough to actually write one of those. Actually, it's easier with nowadays with the ebook series because you could put the link in there. Choose if you want to choose this one, push here. If you want to choose that one, push here. You know what I mean? So that would be easier if it was an ebook. But as far as, flipping to page 57 if you choose B, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, organizing it, I'm picturing like that meme with the serial killer, like where the guy's got the board with all the string going out everywhere, connecting everything. That's kind of how I picture people writing these.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to make sure everything loops to an ending. Like the QA on that, the quality assurance on that is just got to be insane.
That's why, I am smart and I'm sure I could do it, but it would drive me nuts. Just like writing something that has a paradox, like time travel. Like I have to ask myself all these questions like A, B, C, D, E. Is there a paradox there? Because if a fan writes to me after I publish this and say, there's a giant loophole in this, I'm just going to hate myself.
You've got to be careful because there's some famous flops with that. Like I think it was Kate and Leopold, where they were doing their first release of the movie, which involved the time travel, and they found out they were actually like it was an incestuous pairing because they were related because they messed up the loop somehow. Like they messed up the history when they went back, and the fans were like, "Wait a minute, that would mean she's his like great grandmother or whatever." Right. And it's not like they were trying to do that. It was literally just, you're trying to tell a romantic story. And if you're not really, really careful, they did it sort of in Back to the Future too. In Back to the Future also, because remember, he goes back in time and he talks to his mom. And then weirdly, the guy that she thinks is flirting with her is who she names her firstborn son with someone else after, which makes it a little creepy.
In Futurama, he's actually his own grandpa. Yeah. Fry. He went back in time and accidentally killed his grandfather and then slept with his grandmother.
Yeah, that's like I said. So time travel can be tricky, and I don't think any of these people were like thinking of it like that. They were just trying to tell a fun story, and they let the story get away with them because for them, this is an incidental plot point, right? We're just doing this to get to this or to get to that. But if you're not careful and you don't like think it at like 12 steps ahead, sometimes plots will get away from you.
It's hard. It is hard. Like Sarah Star, it does involve time travel, and I kept on thinking to myself, is this going to turn out to be, it's a paradox, but I want to make sure that everything makes sense, right? There's not something in there where a person can call me out and say, this is trash. You know what I mean? Everything seems to work out. Nobody's come to me and said, there's something wrong with this plot here.
So I cheat. If I'm ever going to do that, I'm totally going to be like, oh, it's an alternate dimension. So if the facts don't quite line up right, well, that's because it's a different dimension. There's going to be some differences.
Yeah, I kind of hinted to that in Sarah's art book too, just to kind of cover my P's and Q's. But also in my mind, even though it's time travel, you're going back in time or to the future or whatever you're talking about, it's still linear for you.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? You're still on one straight line. You're not going like this. Your life is still one straight line. You see what I'm saying? So
absolutely,
even though you went back and forward or whatever, it's still one straight line. Your life is still linear. So in my mind, it just happened the way it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's the old joke or the old there's a movie, I think it's called Timeline, where they were researching the War of the Roses, I believe, and they found glasses that were modern that aged like they were from the 500 years ago. So they were investigating and they ended up going back in time, and it turns out they found evidence that they'd already been back there, they just didn't know it. And that was like the loop. If they went back, was the original plan was for them to go back to create the history as we know it, which gives you a lot to think about, because that's like the old assassination time paradox. Like if you go back in time to kill Lincoln, you succeed, so Lincoln doesn't die, so you had no reason to go back, so you didn't stop the assassination, so Lincoln dies.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly my thought process. Like I had to think to myself, am I doing something that's going to prevent, like, because in book 3, I wanted her to like go into cryo sleep until she got to the future and then kill herself before she can go into the past. But then that just ruins everything. You can't do that. You can't undo that by killing yourself. You can't.
Yeah, because then you never went back, which means the you that just killed the other you disappears too. Have you seen Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme?
I probably did, but you're gonna have to remind me of that.
So one of the things that you did is when you went back in time, like you couldn't be in too close proximity to yourself. And
Right.
they had one rich guy towards the end. I mean, it's a spoiler alert, but it's like a 40-year-old movie, people. But he ends up accidentally getting shoved into, because he's the bad guy. He gets shoved into himself. And then there's like this little mini explosion, and the guy just ceases to exist because two objects that are the same can't occupy the same space.
True.
Or whatever. I don't know if that holds up to scientific reasoning, but it sounded cool and looked pretty cool in the movie. So we'll go with it.
Well, I have a pretty good, I mean, I don't want to stay on time travel for the whole thing, but I have I have a really unique take on time travel in my Kirk Rogers series. Because like book 4 has microscopic temporal parasites that can invade every cell of your body, and all they want in life is to time travel, but they can time travel throughout the entire universe, right? So to them it's just basically teleporting to someplace in time, but to the human that they've hijacked, you see what I'm saying? And unfortunately, the person that they've hijacked, where they go depends on mostly the emotions that they're feeling at the time. So if they're really nostalgic and thinking about something, zoom, you've just gone back in time and now you're talking to your grandpa, so you have to be really careful, right? So in book 5, I have something really big planned. It's going to be pretty good. It's pretty awesome.
There's a joke in there about all the men that think about Rome that'll end up back in the gladiatorial games. Like, this isn't what we meant.
Well, most of the time it has to do with, like, for instance, at the end of book 4, Ripley, Kirk's son, he's basically infected with these microscopic, parasites or whatever. And he just happened to think of his first kiss with his girl or whatever, and he just disappears. So of course in book 5 it's called a rip in time because his name is Ripley and he's lost in time, so it's a rip in time. So everybody's looking for Ripley. And of course his name is Ripley because his father loved sci-fi so much, and Alien, Ripley, blah blah blah, so his name is Ripley.
Okay, that's a cool name for picking. Although I would have thought that was a female name, but we can dig it. It works.
Well, just because, that was her last name though, right? Ripley?
I think so.
Yeah.
Wasn't Ripley's also one of the Believe It or Not, like they did the
Ripley's Believe It or Not, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that was a guy or a girl or a company or what.
Okay.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So before we dive too deeply into the Kirk Rogers stuff, so what all the besides that series, what all have you written?
I have Sarasart, which I mentioned. There's only 2 books in that one. I'm kind of thinking about where I would go in book 3. And as a person that like really hates like 10-year jumps between shows or books, I'm literally thinking about a like 50-year jump, with Sarasart. But I've also written Conspiracy of the Fallen. That's only 2 books so far. So book 1 and book 2 are out. Sarasart, I narrated both of those for Audible. But Conspiracy of the Fallen, I hired somebody to do that one, but I haven't gotten around to doing book 2 yet as in Audible. I have a drama. It's called Fractured Bend. Sorry, my mind's just not as what it used to be. Fractured Bend. It's about a guy with split personality. Then I have a romantic comedy. It's really short and kind of stupid is the way I see it. But people still read it. What else do I have in my repertoire? I have like 11 books. The Link Between Us. It's not a zombie film, but it's basically a virus spreads throughout the world and it kind of devolves people into monsters. But it doesn't do it to everyone. But the people who didn't end up being monsters can't procreate anymore. So
Interesting.
we have to figure out a way around that, right? And you know, I'm not going to spoil my own book, but we figure out a way around that.
So obviously those are books and worlds you've created. If you know, insert major franchise came and offered you a chance, is there any one franchise you'd stop everything to write for?
The Orville.
Yeah. So if they asked you to write a tie-in novel to the Orville, you're there.
Yeah.
I watched the first season and then they went behind the paywall at Paramount, and I couldn't justify another streaming service when I was already cutting back what I was. Oh, I hated that. I mean, we went from cable to essentially cable, but now we pay more for it because we still got commercials.
Yeah. I went ahead, like they got me. You know, Hulu, Disney.
Oh, it was Hulu. It was Hulu. Was it Hulu or was it Paramount?
Well, Disney and Hulu. Disney has it now, I think, or Hulu. Either way, but it's on Hulu. And I think I heard that they're actually doing another season, even though there's been like 3 or 4 years in between the last one. Anyway, they got me though. You know, like I'm fixing to cancel my cable. I got Hulu, Disney, and HBO package, and it's $16 a month or something like that, which I thought wasn't that bad. So that's the route I went. But I also have Netflix, of course, and I have Paramount too because I have to have Star Trek.
Yeah. So I just looked it up while we were talking. The Orville actually is on Hulu. You were right. It is not on Paramount. So Hulu is part of Disney. So that's, I guess, how you'd watch that.
I loved it. The Orville, honestly, it's basically Star Trek only, you know, funny and more adult, I guess you would say.
Like the opening scene where they're in the holo projector and he's like dressed as a samurai fighting an ogre. Like when I tell people, like if I would, that's the one thing I like about Star Trek is the holodeck, but every young boy would use it horribly, wrong, and not appropriately. That is one of the examples of way we would do. I mean, there are other examples, but it's a family-friendly show. But I mean, you know, getting to play ninja and killing orcs. I mean, what's not to love?
Yeah. There's actually an episode about the improper use of, you know, the holodeck where he was, one of the characters is using it for, you know, sexual things. And he gets addicted to it, and then somehow uploads a virus into the whole ship's system, and you know it becomes a thing. But yeah,
everything was good though. I enjoyed the show, and the tension with the two main characters, with the captain and the first officer that were like divorced. Like, imagine the shenanigans. Like, you wouldn't do that in real life, obviously. I mean, they created a special circumstances to justify instead of just pretending that wouldn't happen. You know, instead of just pretending that that's normal, they acknowledged that it's abnormal and gave a reason for it, which is I can appreciate, right? Plot reasons. Right. But that created some really funny, like interplay between the characters that I just was like, the writer in me was like, that is awesome.
You know? I just love it. But you know, like I said, I would drop if you know, Seth MacFarlane, you know, rang me on the phone and says, "Hey, I read your Kirk Rogers series. I want you to come write with me." And I'm like, "What flight would you like me to be on?"
So, would you prefer like to do an episode, to do a graphic novel, to write a novel? Like, if you had to pick the medium, what would you choose, or whatever they said yes to?
I would just like to be a writer on the show. You know what I'm saying? Like, if anyone came to me and said, "Hey, you know, we read the Kirk Rogers series. We think that it would be, you know, a really good TV series." I would be like, "Okay, but I have to be one of the writers. I don't have to be one of the main writers, but I have to be one of the writers."
Fair. All right. So that is everything you're known for. So now we can start doing the fun stuff. But before we start digging in to the book that brought us here, we're going to play that beautiful commercial. Let me find it in the queue. One of these days I'm going to prep it in advance, but that's too much organization and adulting for me. So we're going to air that commercial. Boom.
Okay. Gunnery Sergeant John Doe is frustrated. He didn't join the Space Corps to be shuttled around in a ship. He joined to fight. So far, he has only seen a few skirmishes. He itches for a fight, something he can use to impress his junior Space Marines, as well as use to pick up chicks. Now that he's aboard the USS Big Stick, he hopes things will be different. The Space Federation has defeated their longtime enemy, and has decided another war was just what the people needed. One was intentional, the other was not. Either way, Gunny is excited. Now Gunny and the rest of the ship's crew must fight for their lives against an enemy none of them saw coming. What could possibly go wrong? Dive into the Vacuum Suck Hard, Adventures of the USS Big Stick by J.R. Handley and Chris Winder, and find out for yourself.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And now we are back. So first, we're going to talk about the series that brought us here. So I'm going to show you that beautiful cover. So what is the story with this cover art? Like, what made you go with this? Because it's minimalist in a way, but it definitely has that, 1980s sci-fi movie vibe to the look.
Exactly. I had to have it retro, honestly. And like, this actually the second version of the same cover. Like my old covers look exactly the same, only different. But people would just comment on, are you sure about those covers? And I'm like, well, they're supposed to be retro, that's what they're supposed to look like. Like I looked up, Buck Rogers old posters and stuff like that. And I wanted to see, how it, and you have authors going, well, you have your, by CJ Boyle should be on the bottom. I'm like, again, I did it this way on purpose. It's supposed to be retro, like a old fashioned 80s feel type, serial. So, and I loved my original covers, but I gave in, to the people that said I should change my covers, and I finally did. So.
I like the cover. It does well. So did you design it or did you hire this out?
I designed it. I designed my original covers. And like I said, if you saw my original covers, it's literally almost 100% the same, only it's just looks a little bit different. So basically carbon copy. It's just a different color scheme, honestly. But yeah,
okay.
I designed them.
So what is the premise? If you had to give the elevator speech for the Kirk Rogers series, what would it be?
The elevator speech. So like I'm stuck in an elevator with the producer. I would have to say
your sales pitch, I guess, your basic sales pitch.
It's okay. So let's see. His sister goes missing, and he's a captain in the United States Air Force, and he doesn't know it, but he in the same building that he's in, they have a spaceship in the basement, and he ends up somehow stealing the spaceship and flying it to the moon, because that's where his sister is. The moon is hollow. It's a giant spaceship.
Okay.
So, yeah, she's inside the moon. She was abducted by the AI that runs the that takes care of the moon. It's the spaceship has been abandoned. The premise behind that is like it was a generation spaceship that came from long, long away looking for a place to live with the Newtonians. So you have to kind of think. I have to explain something, because the Kirk Rogers series is basically, if you read it. Like if a 15-year-old read it, they would not get all of the jokes. They would not get all of them, but they would still enjoy it, right? But like I throw in stuff from Star Wars. I throw in stuff from Star Trek, probably stuff from Farscape, Xanth even. Like there's literally a wizard that kind of, it's only an AI that kind of prevents them from getting, their hands on this card that they have to have. It's a key card. And then they have to go through 3 challenges, which is basically, what goes on in Xanth. So like I take all of this stuff and I kind of match it up into, a story, a plausible story, a story of its own, really. But there's just so many Easter eggs. They call them Easter eggs. Charlene. I was trying to think of the word. There's so many Easter eggs, I couldn't even count them all. So book 1 is basically Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan with other stuff matched in there.
Okay, so it's a love letter to all the sci-fi you've known and loved all your life.
Yes, honestly, it is an homage to sci-fi.
So, what would be the age range? And I think it sometimes helps just to use like the PG rating because that's what everybody knows. But realistically, like what would you say the age range for your target demographic is? Because you mentioned you think someone who's 15 could read it and enjoy it.
Honestly, my target demographic is apparently, 45 and up. Now, if I run a Facebook ad and you have, it tells you who clicks on your ads, mostly it's all men and mostly 40 and up, which is a little strange to me. I guess it might be my ads though, because, they're Star Trekky, but I thought, in this day and age, with all of the new versions of Star Trek that came out, that, it would appeal to more than just that age range. And, the demographic is mostly men on Facebook anyway. But no, it's not, rated R or anything like that. There's nothing going on in there where a 15-year-old would read it and then say to his parents, this isn't appropriate for me. You know what I mean? So there is, allusion to sex, but I don't spell it all out for everyone. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if there's a curse word, there's usually only one or two, and it would be in appropriate situations where everybody would probably curse, There's 4 books so far. There is going to be a 5th one. I'm working on the 5th one right now. All of them so far are available on Audible, which right now, for some reason, the Audibles are popular. I had a really good narrator. I don't want to do it myself because I figured it's called the Kirk Rogers series. I figured a man should probably read it. A very, very talented young man read it for me, or narrated it for me. So he was awesome. And, like I said, if somebody could call me today and say, hey, we're interested in the Kirk Rogers series, we want it to be a TV show. I mean, that would just be my dream, honestly.
So what can you tell us about Kirk Rogers, the main character?
At first, he seems like a childish, self-centered person that, couldn't care about anybody else but himself, which is selfish, But you find out later what happens, and he's not actually as selfish as everybody thinks he is, and like why he does or did what he did, like it actually doesn't even start out, the book doesn't even start out with Kirk Rogers. It starts out with his sister, and she's in the hospital, and there's something, she needs a new kidney, and the AI of the moon, I'm going to let this part out. The AI of the moon, he needs something to happen. He needs somebody to do something for him. And since the Newtonians, they all moved to Earth, he needs somebody with enough Newtonian DNA to turn something on inside the moon. So he just randomly abducts people and wants them to help him, but they end up in random places inside the moon. So he's never able to ask them to do it,
Right.
But yeah, so that's and it's I wish I could just sit there and tell the whole story. I love it, but eventually, because there's a little tracker on her, because he's in the Air Force, he put something experimental in her backpack, and he finds out that she's on the moon, and everybody's like, well, how did she get in the moon? How did she get in the moon? And that's basically where the whole thing starts.
So do you tell it straight when you're telling the story, or do you go with the absurdity and lean into the gonzo nature of it all?
I lean into the absurdity a lot of times, but like for instance, and a lot of people, I don't know, they come at me for this, but if you like sci-fi and you like comedy, I mean, I'm like, well, it's written like that on purpose. is. You know what I'm saying? So one of the aspects, like the AI inside the moon, and honestly, I wish I could remember where I saw this, but I can't. Maybe somebody will tell me. Maybe one of your fans will remember the show. But there was a show that I watched when I was younger where the AI took on, or the alien, it might have been even an alien. They took on the form that would be most comfortable for the person they were talking to. So the AI dives into Laura's computer and finds like all these episodes of the Bazinga Factory, which is really the Big Bang Theory, but I called it the Bazinga Factory. And the AI took on the form of Sheldon, but I called him Sheldor, right? So it's an obvious play. It's obvious that he's supposed to be Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory, and he acts like him too, you know? So basically a socially disabled robot, because he does get a body eventually.
Okay.
So like I lean into some of the, you know, absurdities or whatever, but it's still supposed to be taken in a, well, it's light, it's comedy and everything, but it has, you know, of course, the serious aspects, you know.
So what about the sister? Is she a main character, a secondary character? What can you tell her about her?
She's probably more or less a main character as well. Like in the Kirk Rogers series, I have at least 5 main characters going, you know, at one. Most of the time when you're reading a story, there's always a sub-story going on, right? Like I have my 5 or 6 or 7 people, whatever it is in the first book, they're split up. They're both on different adventures. And at some point they have to meet up and complete this objective, which is they're trying to stop the sun from going supernova, which, you know, something was programmed to go off every once in a while to stop this from happening. But, you know, a asteroid hit the moon and broke that machinery. So they're trying to obviously fix that. So if they don't fix that, though, then something happens. And like I said, I think this is basically, there's one obvious aspect of it that's so Star Trek, where one of the characters dies and is cloned and comes back to life. So, you know, Spock.
So what about the other characters? Are there favorite secondary characters that you really love in this series that you think resonate with the readers?
Sure. There's Colonel O'Neill, and of course, probably everybody's going, "Oh, that's from Stargate."
Yep.
So yeah, and then there's, like I said, Sheldor. I have a character. You're just gonna kill me or laugh or something like that. His name is Gene Roddenberry. And he's a sci-fi nerd geek or whatever that also worked for the military, but he was basically just a genius, you know, so who got basically kidnapped by, you know, Kirk. And of course, his name is Kirk Rogers because his father liked sci-fi so much that he named his son Kirk.
I mean, there are worse names you could pick for a kid.
Yeah. You know what's weird about this? I've had at least 4 Kirk Rogers, like 4 of them at least, 4 Kirk Rogers contact me and ask me, you know, to sign books for them and stuff like that and send them to them. So that's pretty cool. They're like, "Oh, this is awesome. You know, it's Kirk Rogers series."
It's about me. I want royalties. So is the spaceship that they travel on, is that part of like the crew almost? Do you give it personality, or is it more just a vessel, a means to an end?
It's just a vessel.
So like in the Andromeda series, the vessel had its own personality. The Orville, the vessel, had its own personality.
No, it doesn't, but it does. It does have an AI. You know what I mean? It doesn't really have a personality. So, and you can only this kind of goes along Stargate Atlantis situation where you could only use the electronics if you had that DNA, right?
Right.
So only certain people can actually use it. You have to have enough Newtonian DNA to, use the spaceships. And literally these science types were downstairs in the basement with this spaceship for the last 50 years trying to make it work, and nobody could. And then here comes, Kirk Rogers blasting through there, and all he does is touch the side and the darn thing just opens up. So everybody was like, cool. And they got on the ship. And of course,
Did he abduct them, or did they go with him willingly just to see?
well, like when let's say I was a self-centered blowhard and I just went aboard the ship, your colonel's going to follow you, and then the little nerd's going to follow you too, and then Kirk's going to say, I want to go to the moon. It's going to shut and just take off. So those two were just, along for the ride at some point,
Yeah, I mean, what a ride. Do they stay on the ship for very long, or do they spend more time on the moon? Like, where's the setting for this novel? Is it kind of all over the place?
No, they are, for the first novel, they're only inside the moon. And it's big enough to be like the size of Texas, really. And it's got mountains and animals in it, and not oceans, but lakes and, farmland, like a terrarium inside, but also on the outside edges, you have the technological, places that are, where they run the moon. It was supposed to be sort of like, I wouldn't say a Death Star or anything like that, but it, since it was traveling from one place to another, things start to accumulate because it had a basic gravity on the moon, just a little bit. So that's how it ended up, just looking like the moon to us.
Yeah, but that means if the AI ship ever turns back on and starts moving, we're screwed, because that's what gives us the title shift.
Yeah. Actually, Kirk threatens the whole planet with that at some point because he doesn't want anybody to take the technology and use it for, bad things. Because he is in the Air Force, and apparently the Air Force does get involved at some point,
So at what point in time does the general populace find out at all, or is it still sort of a well-guarded secret?
By the end of book 1, they know, the Earthlings know something happened because, Gene was playing with something he shouldn't have been playing with, and he didn't know that he was writing in the sky on Earth. And he wrote some things that everybody's looking up going, God, is that you?
No, it's Margaret. It's me, Margaret.
Yeah. And they're like, you don't even know what you're playing with. Stop that. He actually, wrote something. Honestly, I can't remember right now, but something funny. I think it was something like ass hat, if I could say that.
Oh, yeah.
And if say everybody in Pasadena was looking up in the sky and it says that, and there's no plane, running smoke across there, I'm wondering where did that come from? So he erased it and then wrote "be good" after he found out, what he was doing. So of course everybody thinks, yeah. First of all, God called us a name, and then he said, "Be good." But so everybody kind of knows something's going on, but they didn't know it was the moon. The military obviously did, because they had that spaceship and they knew exactly where it went. So
is this like an Area 51 tie-in?
I don't call it Area 51, but yeah, they found the spaceship at the bottom of the Gulf, at the bottom of the ocean, and somehow, some way got it to this place, and it was in the basement. I thought it was funny because at some point Kirk is talking about how they're on the moon and everything like that. And O'Neill goes, did you even once think of how it got out of where it was? Like, it probably went through a few walls and maybe a few people too, and Kirk never even thought of that because of where it was. There was no ramp to get out and all this other stuff. I never explained how it got out.
That also means you got to cover how it got in.
Yeah, I figure they put it there and then built the, facility around it.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, you can shrug off because plot reasons and nobody's going to think too deeply.
Nobody asked.
I mean, we still don't have a firm answer on the 3 seashells in Demolition Man, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's funny.
Yeah, I just think people are willing to give you a little bit of latitude if the story's good.
Yeah.
And I think there's joy in mystery. So some of these mysteries, like I think not having answers to, are part of the fun because everybody's in on the joke. You know what I mean? Like the whole 3 seashells. Like we can all laugh about it because nobody has any idea what the hell it means. But I mean, if we knew, then it's not quite as entertaining, right? It's not the secret every one of us has. So I kind of like that. It was kind of genius writing on their part.
Yeah.
So as far as technology, obviously you've got spaceships and alien tech. Is this modern day Earth that he leaves from? Is it, sort of near future Earth? Like what's the original setting?
It was basically, when I wrote it, basically modern day Earth. So like 2016, that's when I first wrote the book. So they had cell phones and stuff like that. And they have this, every single Newtonian abandoned ship 2,000 years ago. Okay. They integrated into Earth, but they didn't bring any of their technology, right? Supposedly. So the AI was just there left to kind of take care of things while they were gone. But they also had automated systems that kept on going, like taking care of, nanobots, taking care of things, making sure it didn't have any dust on it and everything worked still, and stuff like that. So when she ended up inside the moon with her, phone and her laptop and stuff like that, there's nanobots everywhere in there. So not only did it keep things charged, but somehow, some way, when she took a selfie with a giant telepathic spider named Chi-Chi, she sent it to her brother thinking, of course, it's not going to get to him. She was just playing around and took a selfie and, emailed it to him, and it got to him, So that's one of the things that probably will make people think, like, how did that happen? Well, the nanobots are now inside of the computer, into the cell phone, and it's actually completing the desire without you knowing how it happened.
Does it get into the human too? Does it get into the sister?
Oh, the nanobots?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Yeah. So Sheldor programmed a bunch of nanobots to basically keep her alive because she has the problem with her kidneys. But he also put, I called them nubs, that were supposed to grow into new kidneys inside of her. But it takes a while. So it is high, let's say high tech. Everything, it's basically pretty wild, but I have, like I said, so many Easter eggs. Like they actually have to go to Farpoint Station. Shout out to the original Star Trek. I mean, no, that's not the original Star Trek. That's TNG. I tried to integrate like a lot of this, the stuff. Just like you said, an homage to just a love of sci-fi, where I could probably spend the next 5 years trying to figure out how many, are actually in each book. It's pretty awesome, though, if you ask me.
Well, obviously, in historic records, we show the moon before 2,000 years ago. So how do you explain that there was a moon and then suddenly now the moon is an alien spaceship?
Well, some people think that there's actually another moon out there. I mean, like, Google it. They really think that there's another moon. It's just hidden. So So
That's
yeah,
actually the plot of an old sci-fi in the 70s. I want to say it was like Buck Rogers, I think, had it, where it was like a parallel Earth that was like on the complete opposite end. So it was always in shadow of us, and that's what they think.
yeah.
Which,
So but basically, it just took up residence where where it wouldn't have been noticed as much. And 2,000 years ago, that's basically when all of the gods or whatever were born. And I did a little bit of research on it, but probably not as much as I should have. But yeah, I have some. Book 4 goes into some of the gods and everything like that, and like the lore of where Hades came from and stuff like that. Book 2 is basically Game of Thrones and Robin Hood mixed together with Romulans, or even Romulans, because of their haircut and everything. But they're shapeshifters too. So I feel like I try to actually literally come up with the most bizarre thing and try to make a story out of it, and I'll match it together with other things and come out with this great story. So they all have their own plot, right? But they have these other things mixed in that most people are readily going to be able to identify, like, oh, that's Robin Hood, or that's Sleeping Beauty.
Do you have a definite like arc for the story? Is it, you've got it outlined, how it ends, or are you just going to keep writing as long as people are buying it? Like, what's the overall arc? Because it sounds like each individual book stands alone.
Each of it, well, it goes into things a little bit where you could read like book 2, let's say, without reading book 1, because it does give you that backstory a little bit. Like it's I do that thing where you remind people of book 1, like what happened in book 1, the backstory of what's going on right now and why it matters. So technically, yes, you could read them out of order, but as far as an arc, I just keep going with the story. Honestly, I thought book 4 would be it. Ripley's lost in time. Ripley's on his own adventure, and maybe I would, instead of the Kirk Rogers series, I would start writing the Ripley Rogers series for another 4 books. But I decided just to make it the 5th book, and make it where they're actually trying to locate Ripley in time, which, like I said, it's all about emotions. So if you can get those little, mites, I call them mites, for short. If you think about your son hard enough, hopefully they'll take you to him. But which point in time are they going to take you to? And it's pretty
lots of versions of your son.
But see, what the complicated thing is that Ripley's technically only a week and a half old.
How is that? So he disappears as a baby?
So they gave him something to quicken his growth. Not Kirk. Somebody else did it to him, to the his pregnant mom, and he just kept growing. Right after he was born, he just kept growing. So you were either going to end up with a 15-year-old baby, that couldn't take care of himself, that's still wanted a baba. But Sheldor, he fashioned this thing where he could put mom, dad, and Ripley in basically a virtual reality for 3 days, but it's going to seem like 15 years. So they basically taught him everything in the virtual reality that he needed to know, so that he would have a 15-year-old brain along with his 15-year-old body. You see what I'm saying?
But eventually he's going to be a 15-year-old brain and a 40-year-old body as that stuff keeps happening.
Yeah. Well, he stopped growing at 15. Okay. So for whatever reason, he stopped growing. And these time traveling temporal mites, like if I was 50 years old and I got infected with the mites, they would actually make me younger so that I could be the host for longer. So
that sounds like a decent trade-off.
Yeah. But see, you go to random places, you would hope that you end up in a place where you could actually breathe and, because I'm going to reveal in book 5, because we just barely started on these temporal mites, and all of the rules have not been vetted yet. You know what I mean? So since these mites have been inside other people before, maybe Ripley can go to those places too, right? So I need to basically figure out what the rules of this emotional time travel is, because they literally do not care about any clocks, about what year it is, or any of that. All they care about is, you're thinking about this festival that you saw when you were 15. Let's go. And they don't ask for permission before, and of course, maybe he figures out how to control them. Like I said, I haven't figured out what the rules are yet.
Sounds fun. All right. Was there anything about, because obviously we're getting close to spoiler territory if we haven't already crossed that line a little bit.
Yeah.
We want people to buy the book. So the link for this book will be in the show notes. Let me throw that cover back on while she starts. Was there anything about this book in the series, The Adventures of Kirk Rogers, that we haven't asked that you think listeners need to know?
Not really. I mean, it's funny. It's supposed to be comedy sci-fi. So honestly, there are people who literally love every aspect of it, and the Easter eggs are just awesome. And then you'll have that other person that starts just bashing everything. They go, really? You couldn't think of anything better? You had to rip off other things? And I'm like, it's comedy sci-fi. I mean, I did all of that. So you can't please everyone, but yeah, if you know what you're getting into, after hearing the podcast, you know what you're getting into. It's comedy sci-fi with a bunch of Easter eggs, and it has a great story of its own. So even if a person literally never watched Star Trek or never watched TV, they're still gonna, enjoy the story.
So you don't need to understand the the callbacks to get the humor in the moment. You just don't get as much out of it. That's a good way to do it, I think.
Yeah.
This is the part of the interview, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, and you have a role to play in getting more of what you like. So please do your part. And with that, CJ, how can listeners and viewers find you on the wild interwebs? And as usual, links are in the show notes.
Well, I am on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I do a lot on Facebook. I try to keep up with my Instagram, but they can obviously find my books on Amazon. I haven't, published them anywhere else yet, but they're all available on Audible as well. So they can find me on, pretty much all of the platforms. I am on TikTok as well, but I don't actually go there much. I plan on going there, and starting some videos in the future, very, very near future, though.
Okay. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com, where we link to all the important things on that email. You can sign up for the show, recommend guests, all the important business-only stuff. Send all the shenanigans to Madam Stabby Stab at the Instagram, Twitter, and the email linked in the link tree, or you can find our website, which is a bunch of Spotify gobbledygook. One of these days, I'm going to figure out how to get a redirect and get a proper domain name so it's easier to send you to the website and then have that hyperlink to the Spotify. But that's techie, and that's just not I break the internet, people. Sue me. You also, but if you go there you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. We appreciate every one of you that contribute to that. You can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until their hair turns brown. And if you want to support the show and you're a coffee addict too, you could buy some of your own coffee brand coffee with the link in the show notes. Use the code PODCASTGRUNTS. You get 10% off. It's an American-made company or American-made product. It's not a drop shipping company. They roast it in the U.S., employ U.S. citizens. So shopping locally is important to you. You know, for a coffee company, this might be as close as you can get. And I really do love, American-made where I can. Unfortunately, they do not ship overseas at the moment. But if you are overseas and you're drinking coffee, again, I suggest you too try to shop locally where possible, because the corporations don't need any more of our money. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming on, CJ. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to have you back. Maybe do a panel on like comedy and sci-fi or something, or time travel. I wrote that one down on the list already because there's a lot of places you could go with that one, both in sci-fi and in fantasy, I think. Mm-hmm. Although if we try to do that panel, we might make all of our hair turn gray. Because I hear what happens when you think too hard about time travel. But anyway, with that note, I'm going to hit the end button, people, and we'll see you